Da Jia Hao. That's hello everyone in Mandarin, just letting you know how Chinese my mind is becoming. And because my mind is becoming so Chinese, I had to play the most Chinese mod I can think of. Kaiserreich has recently hit us with yet another China update, adding a revamped focus tree to the southern Chinese nations of Yunnan and Liangguang. Jokes aside, they have really put together a pretty comprehensive and replayable campaign with these two nations, and it's honestly one of my favorite types of campaigns, where you start with 2 rifles and a dream, and eventually take down the powers who underestimated you and establish yourself in their place. You may think a nation like Liangguang would be a nothing burger, but let me show you what they can do. First off, the lore. Here's a very condensed explanation of how we got here. China was having an especially bad time in the 1910s, which, compared to what else was going on in the world, was quite the accomplishment. In the ruins of the First Republic of China, the monarchists in the north were fighting the Kuomintang in the south over the future of the country. And the Kuomintang were on track to beat those monarchists until the Germans came in at the last minute to put an end to the northern expedition. The monarchists were able to re-establish Puyi as the emperor, but they didn't exactly fix any of China's problems. Puyi maintains minimal control over most of China, mostly relying on local warlords leading over much of the land, while the Kuomintang remnants await their time to strike again. Liangguang starts off with a deceptively small focus tree at the start, but as I progress through the campaign, it will expand and give me more to do. When I look at my decision menu, we see the setup for the first problems we're gonna have to deal with. This minigame is basically your first choice for what path you're going in the campaign. It doesn't start for a bit, and leading up to that point, you get events that will affect the starting positions of the factions. Once Black Monday hits, things start kicking off. With the Germans pulling out of China and Beijing not knowing what to do, it was clearly every man for himself in China, so we entered another period of warlordism. While the left Kuomintang in the form of the Mingan insurgency fight for control of eastern China, the right Kuomintang is going to have a different kind of battle in Liangguang, where they will fight the other 2 factions for control of the area. Now, the minigame is really kicking off, and I've already given the Kuomintang a significant head start. The game itself is pretty simple. I just use my command power to lock down states and choke out the opposition. Kuomintang troops would move from city to city, taking out the federalist and regionalist strongholds. The people were worried about the conflict escalating, but fortunately, the Kuomintang were able to lock down control of Liangguang. They now had a solid base of power to prepare for the second northern expedition. Chen Jitang led this takeover of Liangguang, but his position wasn't completely secure. Without external pressure forcing unity, the Kuomintang was falling into its old habit of infighting. Chen Jitang's cortisol was spiking through the roof with all these arguments, having to sort out grudges that have been going on for years. Managing his realm would have driven him completely mad if he didn't get some relief with today's sponsor, Raycon. It doesn't matter if you're just an average Joe or a Chinese warlord, Raycon's open earbuds are something that can easily fit into your day. They have a good hook that actually keeps them attached to your ears and are so lightweight you barely feel them on your ears. And best of all, have 8 hours of playtime plus a case that adds another 36 hours. That's why ever since I got a pair of Raycons, I've been using them every day I go to the gym since I never have to worry about them falling out of my ear. They're also convenient for me when I do work outside the house since I can switch audio from my phone to my laptop seamlessly without repairing. They really nailed the delicate balance for open earbuds of delivering great sound quality while also allowing you to hear what's going on around you. Raycon is delivering premium sound quality at half the price of their competitors with their spring refresh sale, and if you click on my link down below, buyraycon.com/thatguyfromcollegeopen, you'll get yourself an extra 20% off your order, making it a steal. Thank you to Raycon for sponsoring this video, and now back to Liangguang. Fortunately for Chen, the Kuomintang infighting would reach a new level. Basically, the left Kuomintang, who are the Mingan insurgency, have sent Chen Mingshu into the northeast to rally support for leftists and overthrow the right Kuomintang government established in Guangzhou. Enter the second minigame called Clash for Canton. Here you decide if you want to repel the leftist influence and stay with the right Kuomintang, or undermine Chen Jitang's regime and set the stage for a leftist coup. Since I will be remaining with the right Kuomintang, this minigame is a lot easier than the last one. All I have to do is get my party popularity over 30%, and I'm at 28%. All I need to do is send my army out to do one skirmish against Chen Mingshu's forces, and I have the support I need to invite back the Moscow Committee. These are the real thought leaders for the right Kuomintang movement, who have been waiting for this very moment to return. The most important man of this group goes by the name of Hu Hanmin. Party infighting had forced him to stay in Moscow for the past decade, but now Chen had secured a safe space for his return. Sadly for Chen though, Hu isn't content to sit in the passenger seat for this mission, so he is convinced to let Hu take the wheel and we become the Guangzhou nationalist government. Luckily for Hu, infighting will be tuned down a bit since the left Kuomintang was torn to shreds by the Anqing clique, who has now formed the League of Southeast Provinces. As the new leader, Hu makes a speech declaring his commitment to the late Dr. Sun Yat-sen's three principles of the people: nationalism, democracy, and the people's welfare. In time, once the majority of China was united under his leadership, they would create a national constitution. All things may seem uncertain now, but in time, he believed they would achieve Detong, the great harmony where China will flourish. This sets up the revolutionary zeal mechanic represented through a balance of power. The more zeal, the more likely Hu's vision will prevail, and each level has its own bonuses and malices. Now it's time to look beyond Liangguang and expand the right Kuomintang. There are three factions fighting for dominance over China: the Qing loyalist, the Fengshan opportunist, and the righteous Kuomintang. Fortunately for us, Yunnan is aligned with our ideals, so I'm able to get an alliance with the Yunnan clique. The Kuomintang is forming a solid power block in southern China, and soon Sun Fo, a child of the legendary Sun Yat-sen himself, arrives in the city of Guangzhou to offer his support and connections to Hu Hanmin. Hu had also successfully consolidated control of all the troops in Liangguang, finally allowing me to change my division templates and build more divisions. Shortly after, we had shedded off the worst effects of Black Monday, so now I could expand the economy to support a much larger military. With the Hunan clique looking very isolated and weak, they would be the first target of my expansion. At the end of 1937, I felt I'd build up my army to be strong enough to take them over, and started prepping the invasion. We gave them a chance to stand on the right side of history, but instead, they chose to be swept into the dustbin of history. My divisions weren't the best, but we had artillery and he didn't, so this fight wasn't too hard for me to deal with. After showing my strength on the battlefield, I was sure that the Sichuan clique would see reason and join my faction, but sadly, that was not the case. They would get theirs in time, but first I needed to wrap up Hunan, who gave in after the fall of Chengdi and Changsha. Sichuan would be a bit harder to take over than Hunan because of the matter of its terrain. There was a whole mountain range sitting between me and Chongqing, and it's not like I could get creative with my strategy here. I just had to keep launching attacks on their line If the 3rd infantry charge didn't work, then I just hit him with a 4th one. Still, our struggles didn't affect our revolutionary zeal. Sun Yat-sen's principles were truly inspiring the people and had them wishing for reforms. This was music to Hugh's ears, and he fanned the flames of revolution even more. Finally, in August, I got the breakthrough I needed into Sichuan and could cross the Yangtze River into Chongqing. I rushed men across to take the city, and the attack looked solid at first, with the defenders being so exhausted. Unfortunately, the city was continuously reinforced with fresh defenders, and the rough terrain in the region made it exceptionally difficult to supply the troops in the beachhead across the Yangtze. So once again, we sat in a stalemate for a while. I did get another crossing just south of Zichang, and since that town had a supply hub, I knew I would have to take it to be able to push more into Sichuan. I slammed a bunch more divisions into the mountainous area and eventually overwhelmed its under-equipped defenders. With that supply hub, I could really take advantage of the breakthrough I made here, but before I do that, there's some concerning updates to the north. Marshal Zhang Zulin of the Fengxian clique is finally seizing the moment to take out his main rival in Beijing. Joined with him are the forces of the League of Southeast Provinces, who will support his invasion to the Qing government and eventually his claim to all of China. But Zhang isn't doing this all by himself. The only reason he's lasted this long is because of his connections with Tokyo. That man has to be stopped. He's sold his soul and has the naivety to think that the devil has a refund policy. In the meantime, I need to finish my war soon. With the capture of Zichang, our supply lines can easily support our troops across the Yangtze, and with their line so thin in front of Chengdu, I take advantage of that by punching through towards the city. Once taken, we have even more supply range, so my next move is a sharp hook to the east, to isolate the majority of Sichuan's troops in the mountains and take the remaining big cities. I was moving so fast they couldn't organize a proper defense, and soon I was able to push them out of Chongqing and snipe the city of Daxian with little struggle. After that, Sichuan was ready to quit and I annexed all their territory. I wanted to fight Zhang's faction next, but I knew a fight against him would be a fight against Japan, and I couldn't half-ass that war. At least while I was getting stronger, Zhang and his Anguijin goons would weaken themselves fighting the Qing. Eventually, in July 1939, the Qing gave in to the Anguijin forces, and with Beijing's demise, we are recognized as the most legitimate government in China, much to Zhang's dismay. I was the only thing standing between Zhang and his complete subjugation of China, so very quickly he declared war on me and even called in his masters from Tokyo to help him out. I definitely wasn't as strong as I wanted to be, but fortunately Yunnan had a lot of troops I could use in a pinch. I could also create the Chinese United Front to unify the remaining warlords against Japan. This is the war that will truly define China's future, either as cattle to be milked and bled dry by Tokyo, or as an eagle free to fly to any height or destination of our choice. It is at this point revolutionary zeal reaches its apex. Hugh Hanmin and other senior members of the government struggle to hold meetings, since they can often turn into screaming matches between more radical voices. Out in the countryside, fellow Kuomintang members will lynch each other over ideological disagreements. People are begging Hugh to stop the chaos and moderate people's expectations, but instead he decides to ride it out, despite the violence. This idealism is what China needs for its future. That decision didn't sit well with other members of the government, who, led by Li Zongren, came in hot during a meeting, saying he is on fraud watch and a traitor to China. There was a lot of shouting and more mean words said, but when there was a moment of silence, Hugh had to make a decision to secure his position as chief executive. He decided to have a closed vote with other members of the executive committee, and since they had just as much faith in the revolution as he did, they kept Hugh as the chairman. As for the poor General Li that sought to depose Hugh, he was sent on a permanent vacation. With his internal enemies dealt with, Hugh could fully focus on fighting the external threats to the Kuomintang, but for a while, he would have to be on the defensive. The Japanese were trying to push along the coast and isolate us from the world, and we had to fight hard to hold our positions. They tried to surround the port of Shantou with a combined land offensive and naval invasion, and it was very close to being successful. I was only saved by a last stand order and an 11th hour arrival by a few reinforcing divisions. We pushed the Japanese back to the beaches and destroyed all their divisions. This was their first proper offensive, and they were out easily over 100,000 men. We're barely 2 months in, and it's not looking good for the co-prosperity sphere. With Japan stuck in a stalemate against us now, there was only one reasonable thing they could do from this position: declare war on more countries. If they can't get the W against me, maybe they can get it against Germany. With Japan committing to overseas fronts, I thought I'd try to make some gains against their collaborators in central China. I was on the brink of something great near Changde, but climbing this mountain in Enshi was turning into a Sisyphean task. They just kept funneling men there. The terrain wasn't so bad in the east though, so I started pushing there and managed to get a few tags on the Angujan forces. It wasn't until the middle of March that Kuomintang forces finally conquered Enshi and cut off over a dozen divisions in central China. This was another great victory for the Kuomintang. Now central China could breathe freely. Around 120,000 enemies would perish in those mountains. After that struggle, it was clear to Hugh that the Kuomintang needed a dedicated mountaineer corps, so one was formed and led by General Chang Chien. More mountaineer troops would be trained, and once ready, they would be the main hammer we'd use to break the Angujan lines. But while I'm waiting for them to be ready, I'm not just gonna let opportunity pass by. I noticed that the coastal sector is still weak, so I massed my forces to break through their weak points. From there, I'm able to run up the coast and towards the city of Nanping, but the mountains form a hard barrier for my troops to break through. I still believed we could break them here, so I gave my divisions time to rest and opened up combat with by attacking from more directions. We were much more successful, and our enemy was forced to flee that mountain. This got me another solid pocket around Liangguang, and around 10 more divisions would soon be off the battlefield. The Japanese tried to regain that lost land with a naval invasion around Fuzhou. I ordered the men in that city to fight to the death, which brought me enough time to bring in my new mountaineer corps to the coast and deal with these invaders. My special forces easily mopped up the Japanese, and upon seeing that their invasion was failing, Japan took out its anger by declaring war on the Entente for Hawaii, who looks like they aren't having a good time right now, so that wasn't the worst call, I guess. While the Japanese waste their time with these pointless wars, I'm gonna put those mountaineers to work. The western sectors of the front are sparsely guarded, so I'm able to punch through this part of the front with ease. I want to make a pocket by Liangguang, but supply ain't letting that happen. However, that doesn't mean I'm gonna let this offensive be a bust. By Wuhan, I launch another attack to meet up with the mountaineers running amok in the Angujan rear. The Japanese and their collaborators are forced to send forces to the center to try to stop the bleeding, but they aren't good enough. We are able to hook into the city of Wuhan afterwards, and we are in a good position to make so many more moves against the co-prosperity sphere. First, I go after the stragglers who were defending the Wuhan area, snagging another 7 divisions. Then to the west, we're able to take Luoyang, and with that town's capture, I'm bagging another 9 divisions. 1941 is gonna be the year I destroy the Liangguang dream. After the destruction of those 16 divisions, co-prosperity casualties are now triple my faction's casualties. What's great now is that I finally pushed the Liangguangs back to the part of China where it's mainly flat land, so I can think bigger with my offensive plans. I got my mountaineers together to do my largest operation yet. On February 9th, they would begin by pushing downstream the Yellow River to cut off the League from the Fengshan clique. Everything went better than I expected. Once we cleared Kaifeng, it was clear the Japanese High Command was panicking about how to respond. They had overcommitted to so many overseas fights, they had little to spare to help their Chinese allies. The front was moving so fast, the commanders on the ground would give orders that would be outdated right as they gave them out. This led to a big blunder in Xinjiang, where they thought the city would be under attack, so they sent reinforcements. But in reality, the city was about to be cut off, so they just fed a bunch of divisions into a pocket. On March 21st, only 40 days after I started this offensive, my mountaineers reached the Yellow Sea and cut the Liangguang in two. I was definitely worried about my divisions making a run for it, so I kept the pressure high by rolling my army southwards. The League put up a hard defense in Nanjing, but at this point, their army had been too depleted to be able to fight as well around the city, so I slowly enveloped and encircled the city. Meanwhile, Shanghai was getting cleared out, and with that area dealt with, the writing was on the wall for the League. They weren't getting any more help from their allies, and once all their major ports were taken from them, the government fully collapsed. I said that we would kill the Liangguangs this year, and I intended on fulfilling that. In August, I began another grand operation. It started with the mountaineers pushing from Shaanxi to move towards the sea and Yellow River. Once they had their breakthrough, I would also launch 2 pincers from the south, one to meet up with the mountaineers and another to clear the Shandong coastline. I really couldn't complain about the results. Everything went to plan. I got the encirclements as expected, and we weren't getting slowed down at all. By September, I've practically paralyzed Japanese High Command. They're not moving their divisions, and I'm taking advantage of it. 2 massive pockets in northern China, with many more being killed as they try to flee Shandong. There's little left to fight as my divisions turn their attention north to Beijing, and on September 24th, we finally liberate the city. This day is a day of celebration for the Kuomintang. We had accomplished what the first northern expedition failed to do decades ago. Hugh Hunman makes a speech to the people explaining why this is such a big moment for us and his commitment to the national revolution that Sun Yat-sen fought for. He believed that accomplishing the 3 principles of the people were in reach, but we have to be on the lookout for people who seek to sabotage our goals. With the Kuomintang's conquest of most of China, there were some elephants that couldn't be ignored either, but fortunately, we've damaged the Liangguang forces enough that these debuffs won't really get in our way. The Fengshan and Japanese armies remaining had their backs broken after this past year of combat. Now, it's time to put them out of their misery with one last offensive. In mid-October, we push north once again to put an end to these menaces for good. I was trying to go for a pocket by reaching Mongolia, but before we reached there, Zhang had finally accepted his dream was dead. With a month and a half to spare, I had finally destroyed those pretenders. And considering the state of Japan right now, they are definitely not coming back. As I mop up the final Japanese divisions on the mainland, I see that the Fading Sun mission is ticking down, so all I need to do is kick my feet up and wait. Well, until they somehow manage to rope Siam into this. They must have had some serious dirt on their king to make him make such a bad decision. With this moment to breathe though, I decided to take a look around the world. The Reichspakt ain't looking so hot, with Germany being carved up and also being betrayed by Poland, who is just holding on by a thread here. But looks like liberal Russia is doing decently at least. Socialism has won in America though, and they took Canada with them. The Entente is even more toothless than normal. Anyways, on June 2nd, 1942, Japan finally comes to us with a ceasefire agreement, completely abandoning their collaborators and colonies in China and Korea. I managed to get all their land in the peace deal except for the city of Shanghai, who I'm forced to let remain independent. Shaanxi ain't happy about this treaty and prepares to declare war, but let's be serious here, we all know how that's gonna go. After this long string of victories, no one can contest the Kuomintang's claim to be the rightful ruler of China. So on September 9th, we make it official. There are celebrations across the land of course, but my story here isn't over. We still need to accomplish our revolutionary mission. Somehow, Japan snaked their way back into China through Qingdao and Shanghai. I don't know how they did it, but they ain't gonna keep that. For now though, we're gonna be looking internally. The goal is to create a constitutional republic. Hugh Hanmin wants to wait on writing a new constitution though. He believes the time isn't right, but Sun Fo on the other hand believes it is a perfect time and has low-key been drafting one in his free time. Next year, an election was held, and despite Hugh's confidence and competence during the Northern Expedition of China, the members of Congress wanted someone different to lead us to the three principles, and who better than the child of the man who wrote them, Sun Fo. Hugh wasn't happy with the results, but still stuck to his principles and accepted his loss. With Sun in charge, he had a lot to do. To build a democratic society in China and establish it as a great power on the world stage. With the amount of revolutionary zeal that was in the country, the people weren't going to be patient for democratic reforms, and were sure to constantly remind Sun Fo of his promise. So, I moved towards drafting a provisional constitution as fast as possible. And over the next few weeks, Chinese government officials discussed how the Republic and the Republic of China would work, doing things like depoliticizing the military, setting how representation in Congress should work, and how the president should function. Once this was all set out, Sun Fo congratulated everyone involved, feeling that they had created something great together. Now, it was time for China to spread its revolution across Asia and become the great power it deserved to be. Soon, I created my faction, the New Asia Alliance, and immediately I could invite two nations. Ceylon just left me on red, but the Philippines were totally on board. We still needed to properly unify the Chinese home region though. We had some talks with the Russians who were okay with us taking Xinjiang, but got really touchy about Mongolia. But somehow we didn't talk about the elephant in the room, that is, how they ended up in control of Shanghai. I'm not even sure how they got it since Japan occupied it before. Somehow they just snuck it away from Japan in a peace deal, I guess. Anyways, I send my demands to Tibet, Mongolia, Xinjiang, and Maklik. Tibet responds first, knowing they really couldn't say no, just asking if they could have some autonomy, and I just roll with it knowing that their time will come later. Mongolia, on the other hand, ran to the Russians for protection, and as much as I wanted them, Russia is the only other major liberal power in the world. I really didn't want to fight them. At least Ma and Xinjiang were happy to join without any conditions. Next up, I needed to have a word to these countries about those treaty ports.
No way. Not this time. No.
Couldn't even do anything about Shanghai because I have a truce with Russia for another 6 months. Next year, when I can finally cancel the non-aggression pact, I go for Shanghai, and the Russians are surprisingly pretty chill and let me have them. This puts an end to the legation cities, which finally gets me off the dog shit unequal treaties trade law. China is certainly showing its strength now, but that doesn't mean we're gonna be without challengers. India is soon threatening war against us. They are mad about the Tibetan control of the Tawang region, but even though they're our ideological ally, I'm not gonna be pushed aside. China doesn't back down anymore. By the way, since they refused us when we asked nicely for the port cities, we decided to do things the not so nice way and just swiped all their treaty ports from the colonizers. After that, war breaks out with the Indian invasion of Tibet. This actually gives me the perfect opportunity to coup Tibetan leadership to something more Sino-friendly under the guise of protecting our interest. There was a bit of whining and crying about us breaking our promises, but in the long run, this is for the best. All eyes can now be focused on India. The Chinese military has shaped up a lot since ending the war with Japan. I have built a large air force with mostly Russian designs and also made a sizable paratrooper corps. They were trained for another conflict, but this war against India will be a great test for them. Pushing through Burma was going to be impossible with all these well-equipped and modern divisions in my way. But as Napoleon said, an army runs on its stomach, so paratroopers would hit key junctions and supply hubs behind their lines to make an offensive possible. Fortunately, the Indians didn't have too much of an air force, so all the landings were able to go off, and as expected, the Indian troops on the front lines start immediately struggling for supply. This allows me to push in a bit, and I save the majority of the paratroopers, but I didn't get the big breakthrough I was really hoping for. So once the front line settled again, I sent the paratroopers back to try the operation once more. These paratroopers would land farther back in the mountains to cut off their retreat path and supply lines. My mountaineers would start their offensive towards those mountains before they launched to meet up with the paratroopers quickly before the Indians could respond. When the operation began, things went so smoothly, I was shocked. I was expecting some struggle to hold the pockets, but the Indians were all running around in a panic, not knowing what to do. It felt as if I got the majority of the Indian army here, which definitely would make the rest of the war so much easier. I'm not sure how many divs I got here, but it's gotta be at least 1 million men gone. India tried to reform the main front line when I passed Calcutta, but now we're reaching the point where India is a lot more flat, and this just happens to be a great opportunity to use my new mechanized rocket arty divisions. Combined with the mountaineers, they easily crumple their front line, and now it's a race for the mechanized divisions to overrun as many Indian divisions as possible. They really tried to stop me, but the mechanized divisions are just too fast for the retreating Indians to outrun, and they are cut off in the foothills of the Himalayas. With the Burma operation followed by this disaster, India is closing in on 4 million casualties, and while they technically still have a fair amount of divisions running around, they're little more than speed bumps for me while I drive to their remaining cities and force their surrender. With India gone, there is only one more obstacle to freedom in Asia, and it's about time they're dealt with for good. Unsurprisingly, I couldn't really make a navy capable of beating theirs, but that wasn't really the plan anyways. I assume since they lost so much in previous wars, they didn't have a lot to guard their homeland. Once the mechanized divisions drove onto the Japanese islands, it was an easy time. To their credit, it did feel like there was at least an attempt at a fight here, but no defensive line in this game survives constantly being bombed by over 400 casts. As I closed in on Tokyo, Sun Fo had a nice moment of reflection. His father's dream of the Republic of China had come true, and he had the honor of seeing it through. all those years in exile, and he is so thankful he never lost faith, because not only has he honored his father's wishes, he has become a symbol of hope for the next generation in this republic. The road ahead for him in China may be a bit bumpy, but at least they're brightly lit. On January 15th, 1946, Japan capitulated to us, and while her allies still tried to resist us, in time they will receive the liberation they deserve. The last member of the co-prosperity sphere, Indonesia, surrendered to us on the 29th of June, 1946. And finally, China's freedom can radiate unfettered through Asia. I couldn't help but notice that I could talk to the Russians again about Mongolia, and this time they cared a lot less about defending them. I guess seeing the righteousness of our mission convinced Moscow we're not a threat. It's interesting though how liberalism has spread through all of Asia, yet Sternberg has still managed to hold on to Mongolia. Because it's kind of funny, I'm just gonna give Mongolia the Tibet treatment so he can stay in charge. This white boy, he's alright. With that done, I'm just gonna go ahead and declare that we have won our fight against imperialism. I've done enough, and Asia is gonna be breathing very freely for years to come. Honestly, we got an S tier setup for a possible Cold War in this world. Russia and China are the beacons of liberalism, while the West has been completely dominated by socialism. And then there are the reactionary remnants holed up in their colonies in Africa. Really cool to think about what would happen, but anyways, wow, that was a long video, but I hope y'all enjoyed it. If you did, make sure to hit the like button so other people will see this video too. You know, as much as everyone makes fun of Kaiserreich for all the China updates we've seen, I'll give them credit. They are pretty good, and each one has felt better than the last. The only problem for me is that the politics flavor gets laid on really thick early on, and it can be hard to know what's exactly going on and who's who and who's doing what. But anyways, I still had fun. Y'all should really try these countries, they're super replayable. Shout out to my wonderful alumni going the extra step to support these videos on Patreon. Y'all are great for that. And I really appreciate all the support there. Also, thank you Raycon for sponsoring this video. If you want to get a good discount on some solid earbuds, don't forget to check them out through my link below. That's all for me today. I'll have more good stuff for y'all soon. Bye bye.